Hi everyone, my name is and today we're going to learn accessibility by building a quiz. This is one project of the freeCodeCamp, the Path of Responsive Web Design, and we're going to basically build something like this, all right, a website that will look like this. We're going to add the student info, the name, email, and the birthday. Then we're going to have some questions with some checkbox here, Then we have a drop-down, a text area, and a submit button, and we're going to build this, okay? Then we also have this nav bar. So let's start. So basically the main idea of the project is to now work with the concepts we already learned in HTML and CSS through the previous projects. So if you didn't do the previous projects or if you didn't watch our videos before, please go back and then you come here to this video, okay? So basically the idea is to get that knowledge that we got from the previous project and now adding some important things that make our website more accessible, all right? So it's pretty nice that now we're gonna learn how to make our code looks better, okay? So here the first thing they're telling us to provide the language in our HTML. So here we're going to provide the language and we're going to set to English, okay? Remember that basically in HTML, we're creating this doc type HTML to tell the browser what is the file we're building our page, okay? So we're telling Google Chrome that we're using HTML. Then we have our HTML file with the language English here. So we're saying that our page will be mainly in English. Then we have the head part that is everything that is not visual. And here we have the link to our styles.css file. And we have the body where we're going to write things, okay? So let's go to the next part. So basically now they're telling us to use another meta to say that our page will be responsive. So here basically we need the meta name viewport, the content here with the files width. So we're saying that we want to use the screen, the size of the screen, and this initial scale 1.0. So basically we're saying that we want to have a responsive website, okay? This is just a review of the things we already saw previously. Now we're going to have a meta element for accessibility and SEO. This description definition. The value will be used to search, used by search engines to provide a description of your page. So basically we're going to give a description of our page. So here it's going to be meta name equals to description. This is pretty nice because we're going to explain what is our page. For example, here we're going to have content and we can say like quiz accessibility quiz, for example. Let's see if this works. And that's it. So basically, I'm missing here. But basically we're telling what is our code, okay? Here they change for another content, but it's pretty good because we're explaining what is the content of our page, all right? Lastly, the head, we have the title, and the title is important to say what is the tab, the name of the tab, okay? So here we're gonna give a description, very descriptive and concise. So all of these are good because we're making everything descriptable and people descriptive. So people, they can see, they can actually understand by this code, all right? This is a accessible part. So here we're gonna have accessibility quiz, for example, and that's it. It will be the name of our tab. Now we're gonna work with the body, and basically we're gonna structure our code in a way that it's very organized. Okay, so we're gonna have the header and the main. So the header we're gonna tell that is we're gonna introduce the page. It will be the most important part, like in a magazine, in a news, the heading, and the main will be the content. Okay, so here we're gonna have the header, and we're gonna have the main. And like we can see, all of this we already saw, but now we're checking that it's pretty important for this accessible part. So here, if I understood, basically we're gonna have an image, and every time we have an image, we have here the source. Okay, so this will be the source of our code, and we can see here that is the logo of freeCodeCamp. Okay, they're asking us to use the logo ID logo. We also are gonna have an H1 called HTML/CSS quiz. Okay. And I think they're asking us to have a nav bar. I'm not sure, so let's try it out. So if we do this way, perfect. Right now it's not so good, but we have here all the content we need. Let's go to the next part. So now we're gonna use this property of scalable vector graphics that contains a path attribute, which allows the image to be scaled without affecting the resolution of the image. So basically we're gonna use this width max 100 pixels and 12 VH. And what is gonna happen? So let's take a look in here. So image, now we're gonna use CSS. Basically, if we set width we can set 100 pixels, okay, and it would change. We can barely see here the logo, but when we use max 100 pixels or 18VW, basically we're saying I want the maximum value between these two numbers. And what are these two numbers? 100 pixels and 18% of the total width. VH is basically the 100 VH is 100% of the total width, and 18 VW it's 18% of the total width. I said VH, but it's VW because of view width, okay? 100 pixels and 18 VW. And basically this is what we have. So if I shrink here, it will change. It's not changing much, but we're kind of setting that we want this width, okay? We didn't pass. Here we don't want to use image, we want to use the ID logo. So here hash logo, and remember, we give here the ID logo, all right, for our image, so we're using this ID, and we're changing here the size of our screen. Now we want to change the this message here. So what are we gonna do? Let me see. Basically we want descriptive blah blah blah. So we're gonna change the background color of the image. So background color, we want to use this background color here. And if you don't remember, this is a color in hexadecimal. All right, we kind of learned this in the previous videos. So now we can see that the logo is in here, and now we have this color behind the logo. Then we want to use this aspect ratio that will give a proportion here of what we have. So right now, let me see, aspect ratio here. I think I'm using the correct name. All right, and we want to add a padding here. So we're going to do 0.4 for REM. So now we have this padding, and it expands a little bit, okay? So now we're gonna start manipulating a little bit the header, okay, the way that we saw previously. So we're gonna use here the header word, and we're gonna set the height here to 50 pixels. So now it's not so much about the accessibility, we're just working with the website, okay? And we're adding some extra things in our code. And in here we want this color, 1B1, B32. Okay, so everything's kind of the same, I believe, 1B1, 32. And we want to use here, we want to set the display to flex. And if you don't remember, in the previous code, we were working with the display flex. This way we can position things in a div, all right? Here they're telling us to use width of 100%. So here the width will be 100%. And the 100% is really good because of the responsiveness. So basically we're saying 100% of the width. So you can use 100% or 100 VW. Okay, now we're gonna change the font color of our H1 to this new font color that they ask us to do. Okay, so how can we change the font color? We just use the property color. And they want us to change the size. So here, instead of using max, we're using minimum. And what this means, you wanna get the minimum number between these two ones, and this will be the one we're gonna select. Or it will be 5 VW, or it will be 5% of the width, or it will be 1.2 EM. And EM is just one extra unit that you can use besides pixel. So here, font size, you can use this, okay? And now we change here the font size. That's great. Now let's continue. So the next step, now we're gonna create an unordered list, and this unordered list in the future will be here our nav items. So basically here we're gonna add an unordered list with these 3 items. So unordered list, we use the UL tag, okay? And for every item we're gonna add in our unordered list, we use LI for list item. So we're gonna have info, then we're gonna have, and we can barely see, but soon we will. Then we're gonna have HTML, LI, and finally we're gonna have CSS. We can see because our header is in front of it and has the same color, but you see here the bullet points, so it's an unordered list, okay? Then we're gonna continue. So here it's saying that they want us to add anchor tag. So basically we're gonna have an ahref. Right now it will be empty, but in the future we're gonna add. So if you don't remember, the ahref, it's a tag. It's a tag in HTML that we use to create hyperlinks, okay? So this way we're creating a hyperlink. If we click, and we kind of can see in here, right? Do you see here? If we hover, it appears the cursor pointer. So if we click, we're gonna be redirected to somewhere. Right now I'm leaving it empty, but in the future we're gonna add for where we wanna be redirected to. Now we're gonna work with this nav bar here, okay? So basically they're telling us to use flexbox to evenly space the children. So we're gonna use nav here, we're gonna use display flex, and to use the space between the list items, we're gonna say justify content. And here we're gonna say, actually, I don't think, let me check. Here we're gonna say space between, if I'm not mistaken. And let's see. Okay, it's not correct. Here we just wanna work with the UL. So we're gonna use this arrow UL. So this means that we just wanna get the unordered list of our nav bar, okay? This way we can target. And here it's not space between, they want us to use space evenly, which is nice, evenly. We can barely see. If I put here color white, I think we can see what is going on. So if I use space between, let's see. here we have the space, so it's getting all the width we have in here. We have this width and it's separating into 3 pieces. They space evenly, it's making them in a good space, so we're putting them all in the middle. Okay, so we have a space in the borders basically. Now we're gonna work with the main. Basically they're telling us to create a form with 3 nested sessions. So basically we're gonna create here, we're gonna create a session, okay, and we're gonna have a form basically, and the form, the action will be to this link. We want to, so basically once we submit the form, we want to send the data to this link. Okay, so let's see if this works. Actually, they don't want a session, they just want the form, if I understood. Sometimes a little bit hard to get correctly what they want. Actually, no, they won't. So we want 3 sessions within your form. So we're gonna have 3 sessions inside the form. I think this is what they meant. So let's see. If I remember from the beginning, we have like the name, the email, and the birth, right? And another thing we need in our form. So in the form, we have the action, this action here for the URL, and we also have to say the method that is post. So basically the method post means that we want to send the data. All right, this get method display the data, the post method send the data. Okay, so now we're gonna create this role attribute. This role attribute can indicate the purpose behind an element of the page, so it will be good for the technology that is using here for that accessibility. They're telling us to use the session. In the session we want to use the role region, and we're gonna copy and paste this for all of the sessions we are building. All right, so if we submit, so like we can see here, we pass. Now here, every region role requires a visible label, which should be referenced by the area labeled by attribute. So in this area labeled by attribute, we're gonna tell what are the things we are searching for. So if you take a look in the main project, we have here name, email, and DOB, right? Actually, we have student info, HTML, and CSS, basically. So we're kind of gonna do this right now. We're gonna separate these sessions into these 3 ones. Okay, into the student info, HTML, and CSS. And we're gonna separate the sessions using this area labeled by. Okay, so within each session element, we're gonna nest one h2. So here I'm gonna put an h2 with ID equals to the corresponding area label. So here I'm gonna say student info. Okay, like we said before, student info. And here we're gonna have this area label by equals to student info. So we're kind of making a relationship between this h2 and the session. Okay, so this is the first thing we have to add. So in all the sessions, we're gonna add this. Okay, so here in the next session, I'm gonna add this, and the value will be HTML questions, and here the h2 will be h2 ID equals to HTML questions. Okay, then in the next session we're gonna do the same, and here the label will be CSS questions, and here we're gonna have an h2 ID equals to CSS questions. Okay, right now it's not displaying anything, but far in the future it will display. So far we're just making the label. Here they're telling us to have the message student info, I think. So here is student info. Yes, they're asking us to do what we're seeing here, student info, HTML, I believe, and CSS. Okay, so now we have this structure that we're seeing here. All right, now we're gonna create this border here, this border bottom here in gray. So basically we're gonna change the font for both H1 and H2 to Verdana. So font family, it will be Verdana. And we're gonna add only in H2 here, we're gonna add a border bottom. So here border bottom, 4 pixels, solid, and we want this color, DFE2. So now we have this gray border that we're seeing here. Okay, and it's getting all the width. I believe the next step, we're going to change the width of this. Here it's saying font family, and we need also to add here sans serif, because this will be kind of the default if we don't have Verdana. Now we're going to add an href for the idea of this h2. So basically now we're going to create an href in here in the links. All right, and once we click in info, we're going to go to student info. If we're going to HTML, we're going to HTML. If we click in CSS, we're going to this next part. So basically in here, we're doing this. Once we click, we will be redirected. They are going to give us what is the page we want to show. This is exactly what we're gonna do. So href will be equals to student info. It has to be the same in here. It has to be the same name you gave in here, all right, for the label, okay? And we're gonna do the same for the other ones. So here, HTML questions, I think it's questions, and CSS href, CSS questions. Oops, here it's a dash, not underscore. And if I click in here, they're kind of working the link, okay? Once we click, we're being redirected. And it's not working. It should be with a hash in front because we wanna access the ID in here. We wanna access this h2. That's good. Now now we can move on. This is pretty interesting, okay? All of these things were working. Now we're gonna add 3 divs element with a class of info. So now we're gonna create here these 3 questions, all right? And we're gonna make 1 div for each label and the box for typing in whatever we want. So basically here we have a div and we're gonna give a class equals to info. And we're gonna have inside of this div, we're gonna have a label and we're gonna have a input, okay? Exactly input. In the future, we're going to fill in with name and all of the other things. So basically now we have 3 divs. Now we're going to add for the label, we're going to add the for attribute and we're going to give an ID for each input. So for example, here we're going to have an input name, right? And the label will be for this name. We're going to have an input ID here, email, and the label will be for email. And the same for birth, okay? So let's start in here. So basically we're going to have name, email address, and date of birth. So here we're going to have name and here we're going to say for equals to name. And here I'm going to say ID equals to name, okay? And we're gonna do the same for here, email, the for will be equals to email, and the ID must be here, email. And the same here for what is the DOB, so here will be for example, DOB, and the ID will be equals to DOB. Okay, so we're kind of assigning, we're telling that they are a pair. The label is for that particular input. Now we're gonna give this name, we're gonna give it the property type, the appropriate type and name attribute, and then we're gonna give a placeholder. Then give the first input a placeholder attribute. So basically in here, we're gonna give name, all right? So basically in here, we're gonna say type will be equals to text, and the name for this will be name. So basically here, the name, remember the name is the attribute but that we use to identify what is the data we're working when we are getting the data from the form. So for example, I want to know that what is Giovanna. So I know that Giovanna is the name that was given in the form by the user. Okay, so this is exactly what we're gonna do in here. Now I'm gonna give here type equals to email, and here the name will be equals to email, and here the type will be, I'm not sure what it will be the type in here, we can see, and here I'm gonna call birth date, for example. Let's see, they are kind of okay. Here the type will be date. This is good, we have a date type, and now it's also creating here month, day, and year. Okay, they're also asking us to give a placeholder for the first. So here the placeholder, if you don't remember, basically it's a message to let the user know what he should type in. So here you can say enter your name, for example. Yeah, we can see here the placeholder. Okay, it appears like a message for the user. All right, so basically here they're telling us to remove the placeholder, okay, and just to use the label to let the user know what he should add. Okay, here you can choose placeholder or label, but in the accessibility here they're telling us to not use placeholder. Now here they're saying that DOP is not descriptive enough, and that's true. So here they're telling us to append an element that will be this SR only to the current text content of the third date. So let's see. Here basically they're telling us to add a span element to the current text content here. So they're telling us to add a span, okay, a span. And here they're telling us to use class equals to SR only. And I believe this is it. No. They're telling us that we should place a span after the content. Okay, so we're gonna put this span after the content, and I believe it will be empty, but it probably will display a message for the accessibility part. So this span, we're gonna add here date of birth, and we're kind of gonna put this in small letters, like we can see. We don't see this in here, but we should, in small letters to make the user understand what this means. Now the SR only text is still visible, and we're gonna use this pattern here to not be visual anymore, if I can understand, by my understanding. So here we're gonna do a .SR only, and if we paste in here, it will disappear, but it will be easy for the accessible part. Okay, it won't be visual, but it will be very descriptive of what is DOB. All right, now we're gonna work with the other part of the HTML. Now we're gonna build this question 1 and 2. Okay, so for here, we're gonna use 2 divs, and we're gonna give this class question block. So here div class equals to question block. Okay, and we're gonna add 1 paragraph, P, where we're gonna say here question #1, I believe. And then we're gonna have 1 field set for the question. I'm not sure if this is what they want us to do. So element, add 1 pip element with text of incrementing letters, so question #1, for example. I would think that this is what they want. And then this field set here to make the message. So then we're gonna have here a field set class equals to question. And we're gonna probably work with this field set later to display the way that we want. And we want another div the same way, but with a number 2 instead. Okay, so here we have 2 questions. All right, they just want the element, here number 1, they don't want the question 2. And here I believe they just want number 2. Yes, later on we're gonna work with question. So now for each field set, we're going to contain a true or false question, right? So here we're going to nest a legend element and one UL element with two options. So inside this field set, we're going to have a legend and we're going to have a UL with two options. So an ordered list with two options. So here LI, and then we're going to close the LI. All right. This is pretty much what we need to do in here. And we're gonna copy and paste for the second option. We can barely see, right? The legend, we can see here there is like an empty space, and the ordered list, we can see here the bullet points. Now we're gonna give a name attribute for this. So we're gonna give here, we're gonna give a class. So let's give a name for this field set. Here it will be name equals to question1, for example, and here will be name equals to 2 for question. They want us to use a class in our unordered list called answer list. So here I'm going to use this class for the both unordered list. Okay. And what else they want? We're going to use here the legend to capture the content of the field set by placing a true or false question as the text content. So I'll basically copy here this question, okay? Because I don't want to think about a good question here. So I'm going to put this, okay? And here I'm going to say true or false. And here the same, true, false, and I'm gonna get here another question, okay? And that's it. All right, we can see here the two questions we have. So in this part of the project, they're showing to us that we can add things here in the list item, but the most suggested thing, thinking about the accessibility, is adding a label, all right? So here we should add a label. We're gonna say a label here for example, true, and here we're gonna say an input type equals to radio, because we just want to let the user select one, okay? And then we're going to close the label. I think we have to close the label before the input. All right, and what will be the label in here? We're going to say true, correct? So basically we're going to add we're going to nest one label within each element, and we're going to nest one input in this label. So basically we're going to put the input inside of the label, okay? And here we can see now the checkbox. And we're going to do the same for each of the cases. So here instead of true, we're going to change to false, okay? So here it's going to be false, false. And here it will be kind of the same in the list item. So I'm going to copy these two list items in here and I'm going to paste in here, okay? And we have now true and false, basically, okay? This way we can organize what is each type of things we want to add. Basically here now, we're not required to use label, but we can use or not. So basically here they're telling us two corresponding elements. So here we're going to say what we did, true, and here we're going to set true. So basically here we're going to do exactly what we did in the previous one, but now in the correct way. We're going to say here for true, and the ID of this radio will be true, okay, because we want to set this for this value. Then we can say true 1 because it will be the true for the first question, and we can copy this and we can set the same for the next true, and here it will be true 2 because here we're working with the second question, and here we can set true false 1, and here to false true. Okay, so we're giving a label for the things we're working, and then it's easier to keep track and organized through the things we're working. Okay, so now it's working. Now we're going to give a value of true or false. So basically here they changed to key1 A1, but basically here we're going to give a value of true. Okay, so I'm going to send that it's true for our backend, and then here it will be true again, and here it will be false. Okay. So we are assigning what is the value if the person select this option. This is basically what we are doing. And then we give, you should give the first label, we have to give a context in here. So basically we're gonna say true, okay? We wanna display true in here and false in here. And it will be the same in this case. So we are assigning a value and also a text so the user know what he should select, okay? Now for the next one, we're gonna, if we click in here, right, we can select both, but as a radio we should only select one or the other. So they're telling us to group these inputs together in such a way that the input from a pair can be selected at a time. So let's start applying things in here, okay? So basically to assign one or the other, we need to set the name property, okay? Because the name property will identify for what this value means. So why the users choose true or false for the question 1, for example. And if we do this in here for both true and false, now we're only able to select one or the other, okay? And we're gonna do the same in here for the second question, and we're going to add here name Q2 because we're working with the second question. And now the second question, we can select one or the other. Okay, that's pretty much what we need to do. Now here we want to prevent unnecessary repetition, so we're going to target this before